when more than 17 people were massacred in their own schools. Today marks the 4-week anniversary of the death of 14 children. But not just of the children, of those families, of the children and mothers whose children were ripped from them. Today, almost 100 students have descended upon the Capitol in honor of National Walkout Day and the 17 victims of Parkland shooting. We have come here to talk with their representatives and plead with them and tell them our stories of why this matters. This matters because we fear for our lives every single day. Adults don't understand. Every day you don't go a day in school without hearing about a mass shooting, without hearing about the possibility of someone coming into your school and taking your life. People joke about it in every class. I'll sit in my comp gov and think about how my door doesn't have a door handle for me to pull on, and it will give me anxiety, thinking that if someone came onto my campus, I would be a sitting duck. It's not a light matter. Everyone here behind me experiences this. We experience the constant fear of being taken by a bullet. But not just by a bullet, but by ourselves and our own emotions. Today, we are here to say that the killing of American children must end. The killing of my fellow students must end, and the politics of the NRA and the soldiers of hate and violence must end.
Woo!
The corruption of politicians who care more about paddling their campaign coffers from the Citizens Defense League than shielding their children from a spray of bullets must end. And I think that was shown more clearly in the fact when we filled that legislative chamber and gave them our personal stories from our hearts and our feelings, most Republicans got up and left. They refused to look at us. They refused to listen to us. As representatives took turns telling our stories. Even though most of us are too young to register to vote, we delivered our message to Republican and Democratic members of the Arizona legislature alike, because we know this problem cannot be fixed. Our lives cannot be saved if this partisan divide persists. I remind you again, we are not partisan. Most of us can't even vote. I will not be able to vote until 2020, yet I am here because our lives are not being put first.
Right.
Woo! The partisan divide is killing us, and it must end. Shame on those who left the legislative session today. Shame on those who did not speak with us. Shame on those who ignored us to our face. Today, we put on t-shirts and put our message across. What we want our representatives to hear, because they aren't answering their phones, they aren't reading the postcards, they aren't answering the mail, they won't meet with us, so we filled the legislative chamber with our messages plastered on our chests. We had our messages delivered one by one to the legislative chamber. And we screamed never again, and told them that our lives can only be saved by them. Unfortunately though, again, too many members of the House of Representatives left and ignored us. Today, we'll have speakers from Samantha Leckberg, who had a successful walkout today at Willow Canyon High School to speak about the numerous walkouts across the country and here in the state of Arizona, standing in solidarity with us, the March for Our Lives movement. We'll have Molly Jimerson, a survivor, to share her story. Anderson Zhang will speak about his time working with Teen Lifeline and how suicide in Arizona is a real problem, and the fact that gun violence is intersectionally connected with the issue. Lucha and Puente will speak briefly about how their movement coincides with us. We'll have the chairman of the Teenage Republicans of Arizona speak and discuss the polarization of the politics here in Arizona. And Randy Perez, on behalf of me, Familia Vota, and Next Gen, to talk about our voter registration goals at the March. Thank you.
My name is Samantha Leckberg, and today I hosted my school walkout at Willow Canyon High School. I was was able to persuade about 10 students to leave campus during the school day and travel 30 miles to the Arizona Capitol to speak with our legislators and representatives about the change that needs to be made. Today, students across the country are leaving their classes to meet with their legislators and representatives just like us to find a solution to the increasingly fatal epidemic of mass shootings. Approximately 100 students are here today because when we walk through the halls, we fear. When we hear the fire drill, we fear. We cannot go to a movie or a concert or a mall without fearing for our lives. We are forced to fear for our lives because of the lack of change, so we will march for our lives until a change is made. A good start for change would be to ban all accessories that turn guns into a semi-automatic or fully automatic weapon. We need background checks across the board, every single gun sale, regardless of point of purchase. We need better funded and increased counselors on all school campuses. More guns on campus will do nothing but increase the risk for all students, especially the students of minority groups. Not only do we need change, we need productive change. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Molly, and I'm here to share my story about gun violence. Gun violence prevention is not your problem until it is. And for some, it's tragedies like Sandy Hook or the Parkland shooting that changed them. But on April 2nd of last year, the problem became mine. Less than a year ago, a man named Jerry robbed the restaurant where I worked and held a shotgun to my head and told me that I was going to die. He fired that shotgun less than 5 feet from where I was standing. I was forced to beg for my own life and the lives of the customers in the restaurant, including a 2-year-old boy whose parents were trying to escape. I had to drive into the desert in the dark with the responding officer to identify him. I had to give statements to the police for hours. I had to tell my story again and again to victim advocates, a prosecutor, a judge, a forensic psychiatrist, a therapist, another therapist. The list goes on. There are not enough words to describe how that changes someone's life. My experience with gun violence has ended in a diagnosis of PTSD and many anxiety issues. There is only so much a 17-year-old can handle, and I had reached my limit. I was hospitalized in May of last year for the anxiety and the depression that was a result of the trauma. This happened to fall on the same week as my final exams for junior year and a week before I had to take my ACT. And those might sound like petty things, but they affected my future in regards to college scholarships and even just acceptance into college. I am now a senior. It's been about a year since the experience, and I still feel the effects of it every day. I can't go out alone at night, or sleep without having nightmares, or handle loud noises. And if I see someone open carrying, I have an anxiety attack. These issues, this life, is all thanks to the fact that a dangerous person was able to easily get a gun. I need change. We need change. Students everywhere are demanding change today, and we will keep demanding it until we see the adults who are supposed to protect us doing their jobs. I've read a lot of things about what we're doing here today. I have heard that we cannot possibly be doing this on our own, that we are puppets, that we are being used for someone else's agenda. But really, we have been used as targets for dangerous people. I have read and heard that the key to preventing gun violence is to be nicer to kids in our classes, which is a beautiful idea, but definitely not enough to stop bullets. There has been the suggestion that a problem of school shootings is a generational one, that our generation has created shooters through bullying. These people are blaming the victims. The only interaction I ever had with Jerry was to hold the door open for him, smile, and welcome him to the restaurant. There is an adult influencing me to be here today. It is the man who held me at gunpoint. We demand change, and only with the help of our legislators and the support of concerned citizens can we make the change happen. Thank you.
I spent last semester training under Team Life suicide prevention. There's one thing that I learned, is that the reason why there's so many suicides is because no one is willing to listen. No one is willing to listen to their problems. No one is willing to be there. That is why when we look at legislation we need to pass, it's not just going to be a band-aid fix. We can't just pass anti-bump stocks. We can't just have universal background checks. But we just also need to have, one, first, more psychologists. And second, we need more counselors. It is not just a band-aid fix. It's going to be a continual progression to make our schools safe. My school has one psychologist for 4,000 kids. Most of my school doesn't know that it even exists. The counselors that are there aren't really well connected with the students. And that is why we have suicides. And the fact that we don't really promote any mental health. And this idea that we don't really care about mental health, just because you can't see it, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Once we start tackling this problem, we can begin to solve others. But we have to first recognize that psychological violence and this self-inflicted harm, mental illness, is still a problem. So today, I ask everyone, at home or at school, to find common ground with others, so we can implement policy to deter mass shootings. So we don't have to worry about school safety. So we don't have to see another school on the nightly news. So we don't have to add another school name next to the 14 this year on the next FBI release. And just maybe, you won't have to worry about school shootings.
My name is Ramon Sanchez, and I'm a young person with Puente, and we run a campaign that's called Cops Out of Campus. We strive to eliminate violence in our schools. Join the youth movement and find out how you can make a change in your communities. Armed teachers and police put our lives in risk every minute and second. Thank you.
I've been attending what I like, what I don't really like to call it, kind of came to that. The last thing I really want to worry about going to school, right now I have a lot of senior exam, is having the fear of not going back home. We need to fight. We can't just stand here and not do nothing. We need funds, but not guns. We need to get involved with our community and with organizations to lucha. We need to fight these injustices.
Hi everybody. My name is Jacob Martinez and I currently serve as the Arizona State Chairman of the Teenage Republicans. I'm here because this is not a partisan issue. The issue of gun safety in our schools and in our communities is not one that just Democrats need to support. Today, we saw a blatant form of disrespect from the Republicans when our messages were being read. Instead of facing us, standing in the chamber and listening to our message, they retreated to the members' lounge and wouldn't even come out for the moment of silence. Speaker Mesnar denied the request for a 17-minute moment of silence, even though there's nothing slated for a vote and no real agenda for the day. The Republicans have decided to make this an issue that they don't want to address. And whether they like it or not, it's something that is important and that affects all of our communities. Gun violence is a major issue, and it's something that we all need to band together and fight, Republican or Democrat. Governor Ducey was repeatedly, we requested a meeting with him to discuss this issue and open that line of communication, and it was denied. State representatives and state senators refused to meet with our students because they knew that gun safety was the topic of the discussion. This polarization and this blatant disrespect of this issue and of our young people is why our country is so divided. These issues have divided our nation, when these should not be things that the two parties are fighting on whatsoever. I am officially announcing today that I am stepping down as chairman of the Teenage Republicans until Republicans can figure out what they are going to do in response to these changes.
Woo!
And for those of you who will attack me because of this decision, let me remind you, I am not against the Second Amendment. I am not against people owning guns, but I am against students and adults in all aspects of our community being gunned down because we don't like to get together, work across the lines, and figure out these issues like human beings. Thank you.
Woo!
Today in the House, representatives telling our stories highlighted 3 basic things that we demand. 1, we want comprehensive universal background checks. This is not an issue of taking guns away. Universal background checks will just fully enforce the laws we already have. We already have systems in place to identify those who are ill fit to own a weapon, those who are going to hurt themselves or others. These people are already being flagged, yet they can still buy a gun because they can go on Craigslist and go to a gun show. Universal background checks just fully enforces the laws we already have. They keep guns out of those who want to hurt us. They do not infringe on the rights of responsible gun owners whatsoever. Second, we want to ban up bump stocks. Just as President Trump is taking leadership on this, bump stocks allow people to turn a semi-automatic weapon into a nearly automatic weapon. These are weapons of war. An AR-15 with a bump stock is not used to hunt. It is not used for sport. It is used to kill. And the majority of mass shootings here in America, they have been done by an AR-15 with a bump stock because they are designed to kill people. They are designed to kill us. And no civilian should have the right to own one. Third, we want more funding for school counselors, not more guns on campus.
Woo!
Here in Arizona, we do not have an issue with mass shootings, but we do have an issue with suicide. Just 2 months ago, a 14-year-old boy in Tucson shot himself in the head in his own school bathroom because he did not want to live anymore. This is the gun violence epidemic here in Arizona schools. And even with the Parkland shooter was flagged. Their students stood up and spoke out that this kid needs help. And no one helped him, and because of that, he ended the lives of 17 others and himself. The shooters themselves, something brought them to the point of wanting to hurt someone. And a cop or an armed teacher is not going to heal their mental illness and heal their feelings and emotions. An armed teacher is not going to stop me from going into the bathroom of my school and blowing my brains out. A counselor and a therapist will. My school of 4,000 students has a single psychiatrist, and not many students even know that it exists. I have friends who have talked about killing themselves, bringing guns to school, killing their friends and themselves because they are depressed and don't want to live anymore and want attention. A psychiatrist and a counselor will help. And because of this, we are announcing a letter to Doug Ducey in response to his lack of communication with us, in response to him refusing to even open up a meeting and communication for a meeting. And it reads, "Dear Governor Ducey, we are the generation of mass shootings in America. No child under the age of 18 knows a world without active shooter drills and AK-47. Our childhoods have been plagued by the haunting post-Columbine image of Newtown, Orlando, Charleston, Las Vegas, Parkland, and so many others. Lunch table conversations have evolved from who receives the last Oreo to who jumps in front of a bullet for whom. We have become sitting ducks in nearly every setting of our lives, from classrooms and grocery stores to movie theaters and concerts. We occupy a perpetual state of paranoia that the next wave of thoughts and prayers will be for us. An entire generation of Americans is now needlessly vulnerable to heightened levels of violence, but we refuse to let future generations suffer the same fate. We understand the importance that the Second Amendment represents in our country. However, we do not believe the right to bear arms can be a hindrance to sensible and humane gun legislation. This is why we believe it is imperative to ban bump stock gun accessories, which contribute enormously to the mass casualty count in the Las Vegas massacre. Legislation of this nature has already been enacted in over 20 states, and the National Rifle Association itself has discussed such regulation, including leadership from President Trump. We also must implement universal background checks and close the gun show and private sale loopholes that allow anyone to obtain a firearm without having to meet any eligibility requirements. It's clear that this approach to gun sales is effective. Consider that mass shootings are nearly non-existent in countries with universal background checks in place. Meanwhile, here in the U.S., 94% of Americans support background check requirements for all gun sales, which includes 90% of gun owners and 94% of Republicans, according to the Giffords nonprofit. The evidence and public support show that this must be enacted here in Arizona. There have been numerous proposals offered that could solve the surge of shootings in Arizona every year and the average of 1 school shooting per week on the national level. While we are open to full and frank discussion on the matter, we refuse to consider arming teachers or increasing the number of student resource officers on campus.
Thanks.
More guns in our schools is not the answer. Rather, we strongly recommend a major increase in school counselors and other personnel who can help with students cope with the pressures of our violence-prone culture. Off the topic of the letter, Republicans have said to me numerous times today that it is the fault of video games for our violent tendencies. I'll remind them that psychologists are trained specifically in dealing with that. We, as students who have witnessed 302 school shootings across the nation just since 2013, have no desire to see a further proliferation of firearms, regardless of how highly trained the carrier may be. The sign of a gun in our school would not be comforting. Conversely, our schools would become far safer and productive, and our learning environment would be enhanced if full-time counselors and psychologists were members of the staff. Every year, there are 2,200 shootings in Arizona. In 2017, the CDC reported 970 gun death-related, 2/3 of which were suicides. We believe a greater presence of various counselors in schools would drastically lower this number. Many will argue that any attempt to curb access to firearms violates one's rights to bear arms. However, the rights bestowed upon the people of this great nation are all-encompassing and are not limited to a single amendment of the United States Constitution. In fact, the preambular asserts, "We the people, in order to form a more perfect union, secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our prosperity." Governor Ducey, the present state of affairs is clearly not fulfilling its promise to the Constitution. If our prosperity, the students of Arizona, do not feel safe in the most sacred setting of a classroom, how could anyone refute the claim that we collectively have a responsibility to form a more perfect union? For the improvement of all lives, a safer union for your generation, our generation, and the generations to come. To those who would prefer to allow the status quo to remain and the senseless gun violence continue, we join the survivors of the Parkland Massacre and the families and friends of thousands of lives lost every year and say never again. Respectfully, the March for Our Lives Committee, Phoenix, representing over 1 million students enrolled in Arizona.
Woo!
We also ask that all in support with us today, march with us to the governor's office and the executive tower to deliver this by hand to his secretary. Before we take questions, I'd like to have a 17-second moment of silence.